Good afternoon. Or is it still morning? It's good morning, isn't it? Still morning. Good morning. I'm editor of New Civil Engineer, Mark Hansford. Welcome to our first in a new series of webinars aimed at SMEs. We at New Civil Engineer are passionate about SMEs. We know and understand that SMEs are often where the really creative ideas come from in our industry. But we also know that they often struggle to punch above their weight, get their voices heard by clients and to perhaps grow to their full capacity. Today we are here to discuss the role that technology can play in growing your business as an SME. And we have with us here today a panel of experts who are going to help us through this important topic. Shortly we are going to hear from two SME owners, Graham and Leigh, who will share their stories with us and will explain the role that technology has played in their business growing. After that, I'm delighted to put with us here Barry Blake from Causeway Technologies, who we're working with to bring you this webinar today. And Barry's just going to outline some ways that technology can really help drive a smaller business forward. But first, in a moment, I'm going to introduce Hannah Vickers, who is Chief Executive of the Association of Consultancy and Engineering, which of course represents consultants large and small. And I'll get Hannah's thoughts on where SMEs are going as we head into 2019 and beyond. But a little bit of admin first. I'm really grateful that you've taken the time out to come and join us today. This intended to be as interactive a session as possible. So those of you watching on the live broadcast right now, you can offer up your questions via the question button on your screen. Please do. We'll be taking your questions throughout, and we really do want to get as many of them as possible to our panellists. We also want your thoughts, and so we have a poll teed up which is going to go live right now as we speak, and really we want to understand what you perceive the blockers to adoption of technology to be. We'll give you a little bit of time to answer that question, and we will put the results of that poll to our panellists shortly. But that's enough about me for now and what we're about to do here today. Over to you, Hannah. Welcome. You've been at ACE, what now, 6 months, a year? Feels
2 months, Mark.
2 months! Gosh, doesn't time fly? So, new agenda, I am sure. Yes. But tell us a little bit about what you're trying to do at the ACE and where you think SME's place is in our industry.
Okay, no, so it's really excited actually to have taken over at the ACE. I know we've got an awful lot of SME members, so this is part of why I'm here. This is part of my induction actually.
Excellent.
And part of my research just to better understand actually the detail of what SMEs value. So my thoughts 2 months in, I think this is a really quite exciting time for SMEs. So certainly just the structure and the size of your businesses mean that you are that much more agile, and as we're entering a period of disruption and the opportunity to offer different products and services to clients, I think you're really, really well positioned to be taking advantage of that. So I'm not surprised actually that you are, I'm sure we'll hear your success stories, but that you are growing. And technology is a huge part of that. So one of the things I'm considering at the moment, and I think a question perhaps SMEs individually should be asking themselves, is actually how do you position yourself in future, and how do you make the most of technology from the point of view of buying off-the-shelf solutions, bespoke solutions, and actually integrating that with your areas of expertise. So I think going forward in terms of driving business growth, it's the SMEs that will be most successful will be the ones that get that balance right. So I think that's probably a question we should all be thinking about. Specifically in terms of ACE's role in this going forward, so something I'm quite keen on doing next year is to spend a decent amount of time looking at the future of consultancy, and I think that particularly for SMEs could be quite an exciting piece of work. There's an awful lot that we could do. So what I want to get out of that piece of work is to explore what the opportunities are for you in the future. but also what ACE's role is in helping you remove some of the blockers and some of the challenges, and make sure actually where we have got an opportunity to add much better value to your clients, that we're sort of creating the environment that means that you can actually do that, be that through standards, through getting clients to sign up and approve different ways of doing things, or even down to sort of the contracts and the software that supports that. So that's as far as ACE is concerned, where I'd like to head next year. Like I said, my view on if I was advising a specific SME is to understand what your clients value, and also to look at how you make the most of that sort of balancing act between off-the-shelf solutions, bespoke solutions, and integrating your expertise, because there's never going to be a time when we're going to have software that will be able to replace all of the value that people add. So those are the sorts of things that I'm looking at. This is part of my research, so I'm really looking forward to the questions actually as well.
Well, great.
To see
You want questions. You want questions.
What comes up there. But no, it's lovely to be here and to be speaking with you all this morning.
Great, and I guess, Hannah, one thing to sort of just bring up there, obviously you mentioned it there, this increasing ability to use technology, digital engineering, I guess, to whether it is, as you describe it, bringing in off-the-shelf solutions, and maybe customising them a bit to individual customers. I know there's a lot of government noise around that. We've heard it last week. There's money being channeled into this. So I guess perhaps bigger companies will be immediately kind of attuned to this, because they'll be part of a networks that get to find out about this sort of stuff. So I guess that's a big role, I guess, for us in the media and for you as an association, to really kind of keep people up to date with where government is channeling its innovation funding and what the opportunities are really to capitalise on digital.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a big communications piece there, just to make sure when we've got things like access to funding from some of the grant funding that government's putting out there at the moment, that SMEs have the chance to take advantage of that. But also, I think there's more we can do to just support the individual businesses anyway. There's a huge push at the moment, even from the banks and some of the government-owned investment banks, that can really help to get businesses into a sort of growth cycle. I think the key is really to be clear about actually, where are your opportunities for growth? What is it that you specifically offer? And how can you, as I say, integrate the sort of technology into that offering? Which then obviously opens up the questions around, are we going to sell things differently in future?
Yep.
Because, on our traditional business model, technology does pose some challenges potentially. So I think that's another piece of work I'm looking at next year as part of this future of consultancy, is what are the opportunities, and actually how should we be buying it in a way that means that you can still grow?
Yeah. Right, brilliant. Well, thank you, Hannah. So now, I mentioned it, we've got two representatives of two SMEs here, which are really growing fast. And so I'd just like really now to take a little bit of time to really hear your stories, really, because I think they are great stories, and great stories for everyone to hear. But also, so maybe in telling us where you've come from and where you're hoping to go, what role technology has kind of played in that journey so far. So perhaps we'll kick off. So to my nearest side here, we have Graham Jones, who's Managing Director of Residential and Commercial Engineering. So Graham, tell us your story. Welcome.
Yeah, started 5 years ago. Consultancy, developer background, and it was a generic growth gap in the market to really look at another consultancy out there and offer a real bespoke service to all the clients. Out there we were struggling to find a good consultancy that could deliver everything, and as soon as we set up, the first challenge we had was capital outlay costs, and technology being the biggest one of those factors.
When you say we, how small were we when we set up?
We was myself at the time. I'm so used to saying we now because there's 25 staff and we are one team. But the capital outlay was key, purely because the cost can be astronomical, and you have to manage that, and it's careful. And as the company grew over the 5 years, we went up to 25 staff, and the same problem occurs over and over and over. The technology that you need in order to deliver what the client needs efficiently and quickly is key. And we looked at all different avenues and options, what to choose, the right time to buy the right package, the hardware needed to support the software, and it just grew and grew. We're now in a position where hopefully we've reached to one of the fastest growing companies in Europe over that 5-year period, which is down to the staff really, and the clients and the technology all behind that. It's an integration of everything really. So we've been going now, and the client basis has grown strong. We don't advertise, things like that. It is all down to deliverables, and technology is a key ingredient into that factor.
Great. Well, thank you. We'll talk more shortly, but what a great story. 1 to 25 in what, 5 years? 5 years.
Yep.
Impressive stuff. And you're going to about to hear something similar really from Leigh Abley, who's director of our Abley Letchford partnership. Leigh, welcome.
Yeah, very similar to Graham in terms of the product and the system and the scheme that we're trying to provide to our clients. Abley Letchford Partnership was created in 2014, so we're just coming up to our 5th year in February next year. Very similar story. Myself and my business partner, Sean Letchford, saw an opening in the market to provide, I suppose, what we call a consultancy of yesteryear with modern twists in terms of the provision of technology. We wanted to be able to provide clients with that warm feeling that we used to be able to provide when we were juniors, before the market started accelerating. So basically what we've been providing is development planning and infrastructure design services to residential and commercial developers. It's just gone from strength to strength. Our original business plan was for 5 to 6 members of staff, perhaps within 3 to 5 years. We had 6 members of staff within the first 12 months. We're now on to our 17th. We're looking for our 18th, our 19th, our 20th. It's primarily restricted by the availability of good staff, which is why we've turned towards the use of information technology to be able to more effectively work with the resources we've got. Hence conversations and relationships with Barry and his team at Causeway. It's all about, as Graham said, about getting the right deliverable out in the right time. Clients have got pressures, we've got the same pressures. The ability of creating a company from scratch with myself and Sean, we were just able to challenge everything that I suppose we had a preconception of a consultancy. It was basic things from, should we be using Word? Should we be using Excel? What software do we use for accountancy purposes, for invoicing purposes? Should we use cloud printing? Should we have a plotter in-house? Is it the perpetual licensing arrangements for certain drafting software? Is it a subscription based? And as Graham said, it's all down to cash. When there's just 2 of you around a table with one client, with one job to do that 1 month, and you need several thousands of pounds for software for that 2 or 3 days worth of work, it's a challenge.
Absolutely. Well, brilliant. Well, thank you both. More from you in a second. And Barry, welcome. It's great to be working with you on this webinar. And now before you crack in, the poll results are in. And interestingly, the confidence around return on investment being too uncertain has come through as the biggest barrier to adopting technology, which is interesting, I guess. But I guess that might make sense from what we have heard. You know, it's a big outlay, and if you're not sure you're going to get return on investment, then you're not going to make the investment.
Yeah, it's a difficult one,
so
isn't it?
How do you help with that, Barry?
Yeah. Well, I mean, effectively, I run the infrastructure design business unit within Causeway, and we've been developing a range of software to help consultants do their job, and they are tools to help these guys. You know, so they're taking them, they're applying their expertise. It's not the software that's doing the work; it's these guys just helped by what we do. And so we've tried to develop a range of software. For everything from ground modelling, cut and fill calcs, road design, drainage, vehicle path analysis, lining, signing. Our aim really was to build a complete portfolio of software that we could provide to our clients. And what we found was we were providing that on the traditional licence fee, annual maintenance fee model, which meant that your costs could be quite huge. So what we found consultancies doing was they were buying the minimum that they could get away with, because of the issue of funding the upfront investment and the cash flow and so on. So a few years ago, we thought about, well, how could we deliver the software in perhaps a slightly different way? And so we moved to a subscription model, which was quite a big move for us to change from the big lumpy upfront license fee, then the ongoing maintenance, to a subscription model where it's far less upfront, but obviously it's more consistent over the longer period. So that's what we did. We said, well, let's do that. We'll move to subscription and see how that goes. And actually, I've got a slide on screen here which illustrates actually the effect of moving from the license fee to the subscription fee type model. And it's quite clear, actually, from the graph there. If you went and bought on a license fee model, ground modelling, roads, drainage, line, sign, vehicle path software packages, that's the sort of amount of money that you could have to invest up front. Okay, and then you've got the ongoing annual maintenance fees. And on the right-hand side is our professional package, which incorporates all that stuff, but it's basically, there is no upfront fee, and it's just done on a yearly subscription. So we're trying to help with that in terms of how we overcome the investment, the upfront investment. The return on the investment is still a bit of an issue, but when you're talking about software at sub £5,000 a year for everything you might need, it becomes a little bit easier maybe. And if we look at the next slide here, that's the upfront, and then we're looking at over 5 years. Okay, and actually, it's still, if you look at that in terms of the annual cost per year, it's still less than the traditional maintenance.
So even obviously that now is factoring in the upfront cost plus the ongoing subscription. And
exactly. I mean, obviously, exactly. I mean, we're looking at it as a longer term thing. That's when we get our money back over the longer period. But we're taking a hit up front. But what we've found is, if we look at the profile of the businesses that we're now getting buying our software, we get guys that are just starting up. They come to us, they say, they've known our software in the past and they're expecting us to be quoting £20,000 for the bits that they need. And when we turn around and say, well, actually, it's going to be £3,500, say, it's a completely different story. Those guys can actually afford that to set up. They're going to, and even in the early days when it's just one man or two of them, they can justify that cost because they're going to earn a living out of it. It's not too much risk. There's still risk, obviously. Of course. There always is going to be. But we're just trying to alleviate it a little bit. And in terms of picking up on what you said, Hannah, about bespoking software, what we try and do is work with these guys. So we don't just deliver our software and say, well, there you go. We do try to say, well, look, what do you want to see in the software? What problems are you facing? Graham earlier was suggesting some things we could do to our flow drainage software, to improve it. And we take that on board, and that's what goes into the development program. So we're just trying to do a bit of that as well. And I mentioned these bundles, so I'm just going to show on screen here. I mean, we do more than this, but I've just picked 3 of the bundles for our main infrastructure design software. And where we used to sell all these individual components, we've now bundled them into suites of software. So we've tried to make it so there's something for everybody. They can jump in at the level they need to. So you've got the essential, the professional, and the enterprise. And it's basically, what do you need out of that? Some people say, well, actually, do you know what? All I really want to do is road design and a little bit of ground modelling and a little bit of drainage. So they might go for the essential. Our sweet spot, and the one we sell most of, is professional, because that gives a small consultant, or big ones actually, everything they need. So where they'd normally have to go and buy different components from different companies, they can buy it all from us. They're all best of breed products. And if you're into BIM, you buy enterprise. And you can upgrade from one to the other. So if you start small and say, well, okay, a professional does everything I want for now, but then clients start asking you for BIM deliverables, well, there's an upgrade where you can get that. So hopefully that's helpful.
No, this is well. I suppose what would be really helpful to know, and this is where I'll turn back to our SME owners here. Is I mean, obviously we've seen Barry's slides. I mean, I have no reason not to believe them. Does that? I mean, it does look like a pretty good deal to me. So do you recognise that as a? Is that?
Yeah, very much so, Mark. And again, as Barry was explaining, it's the modular nature of, I suppose, past software purchases, you're always limited by just buying the basic minimum. What you've got to be able to foresee is the need to use some additional software that might be needed instantly or could be several months in advance. So the bundle sort of presentation, there's key elements of software that are easily accessible. The use of the cloud licensing has been amazing in terms of the usability and interoperability of those packages with the staff members as they grow. Yeah. Also by the fact that it's inherently linked with drafting software such as AutoCAD, it's a sort of a comfortable user interface that the staff members have got with the use of the software.
Well, that's a key question always whenever you talk technology, is that interoperability question, isn't it? So and that works fine.
Yeah.
Good.
We also had one of Barry's team come over to our offices where we actually sat them down and talked through exactly what we're delivering, what the clients need, what the adopting authorities need, and showed exactly how those different packages needed to deliver the end product, because whilst the package in the middle does everything it says, we also need the end deliverable, and that did exactly what we wanted.
And because
as well.
in your world you do a lot of work for local authorities where maybe it's a sort of a scheme development where you need to get permission from water companies or whatever to get sewers adopted, that sort of stuff, isn't it?
Indeed.
So for you it's having the right software, which if you can Severn Trent Water or whoever will accept the output. That's the
it's that familiarity of that deliverable, whether it be the staff using it or the adopting body. That was a key importance, which all these different elements within the slides. That's exactly what it does.
Okay, and I suppose in your world, Dan. So if you go to say adopting authority and say, we want to provide you the output in package X, but they say no, we're only interested in package Y. How does that come up often, and how do you?
I was quite surprised. I haven't come across it yet, to be fair. I was expecting to. However, one of the key things that we was talking with Barry when we purchased all the software was, if needed be, Causeway would go across, sit with the adopting authorities, and ensure that it's fully compliant. However, a lot of that groundwork, I believe, has already been done.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And the other point with these packages that we've put together in the bundles is they can be used independently. So these guys will know, someone can be using PDS for road design, someone can be using Flow for drainage design, someone can be using the lining, signing, vehicle path. Yeah. So they're not tied up. When you access one, it locks the lot. So actually you buy a licence and you've got 5 people can be using bits of the software at the same time. And as you mentioned earlier, Leigh, the cloud licensing, it's floating licensing. You can have people working at home. Yeah. You're not tied to software on a particular device. You can have it on a computer in the office, laptop at home, and the licenses will float wherever you've got an internet access. And if you haven't got an internet access, you can borrow the license and download it and take it with you.
Okay, well, we're just on that, sir, and thank you for your questions. Keep them coming in. There's a question on that subject from Tom. Thank you, Tom. So, with regard to the licensing thing, I suppose it's how many do you get, and how do you sort of balance who gets to use it when? How does it work?
It's a tricky one, really. A lot of customers do say that to me. How many licenses do we need? And I say, well, it depends how many engineers you've got, what sort of work you're doing, what the mix of the work is, because you can mix those bundles. Right. So you can have one professional,
so you can have one license but using different people using
absolutely and you could say, well, we need more licenses to do road design than we do lining and signing, in which case you can mix the essential and the pro bundles. So you can say we'll have one pro, so we've got one of everything. We're not doing lining and signing every day of the week. It's great to have it, and it's a percentage of the job. But road design, we're doing that day in, day out, so we need 2 of those and 1 of those. So it's a matter of looking at individual companies and what they need to, with the staffing that they've got and the work they're doing, really. So there's no sort of, I can't say you need 1 or you need 2. It just depends.
And I suppose the point is it's the flexibility that's afforded. Before, and I'm sure Graham's the same, you would spend several hours deliberating on capital expenditure for that piece of software that you would probably not use in its full guise. The ability of sort of software bundles and subscription-based licensing is, I suppose, it's one less thing to be worried about in terms of the capital outlay.
Yeah, and it's easy to expand. Graham, you upgraded a few months ago.
Yeah.
You know, growing numbers of staff. You need more software. Yeah, Graham phoned me up and said I need another couple of licenses. I think it was. You know, and
very straightforward.
Very, you know, I've quoted him, and it's not a huge sum of money. You know, on this model. So, hopefully, you know, what we've done is helping.
Yeah.
It's giving access to more people is what we're finding.
Yeah.
Helping us because we're getting customers we wouldn't have got before.
Yeah. Well, it sounds encouraging. It does sound, you know, affording that flexibility, I guess, as you know, maybe as projects come on, or maybe projects fall away. It's being, because that's, I guess, the last thing you need is, particularly as any business needs, but particularly a small business needs, is to be lumbered with some expensive kit which you're not currently using. I guess that's what kills, tying your cash up in something like that.
We was actually quite surprised how much the different add-ons we started to use. For example, the signage and the lining. It was a program that I didn't expect to be using too much within the office, but I found the more the staff all sat and familiarised themselves with the package and almost self-taught themselves to a degree as well, it started introducing into our workflow, which increased our productivity no end. And the quicker we turn a job around, the quicker we get an approval, the happier the client is, and that at the end of the day ultimately is what it's for.
Yeah. Excellent. So let's get a question. I think this this question aimed at everyone, but definitely aimed at you, Hannah, from Mohammed. Thank you, Mohammed. So, do you think there's a need for a digital transformation, a guideline, or strategy for SMEs? So SMEs, and especially micro SMEs, know where to start and how to progress in their journey. Well, there you go. What do you think to that?
Yeah, I'd say no, 100%. And certainly if we're seeing, there is, government is actually doing that with their big clients at the moment. So they're developing a single digital transformation strategy, talking about how the clients are going to share their data and just be a little bit more open and set themselves up. So if they're doing it, we absolutely need one. I do think that's the sort of thing actually that I'd want to pick up next year in this Future of Consultancy campaign. I think it's two-sided as well, actually. So there's what does how can the businesses make that journey? So almost like a business development guidance note, talking about actually what are the whether it's the funding sources or the the technology suppliers, featuring a lot of that information in one place, so that you can actually start to move your business along in terms of digital transformation. But equally, I think we've got to have a client-facing side, because if we do this properly and we, challenge the likes of Causeway to really help us bring value to our clients in future, actually that's going to mean that we're going to have a whole load of new, exciting, different things that they could be buying, actually in different ways. And there's certainly a need to set that out in one place. So those are my two bits of work that I'm going to pick up next year, and hopefully that will answer Mohammed's question.
Fair enough. Thank you. And I guess if such a strategy was to be created, then we need some input from some SMEs who feel pretty digitally transformed. So I don't know, Leigh, are you feeling like you'd be able to contribute? And if you were, what would you be saying? What's
and again, I suppose as an industry, we are sort of set in our ways. People don't like change. Clients don't like change. So I think we're and again, and I suppose even more so, some of the trades that Graham and ourselves work with in terms of our deliverables. Obviously, we need to progress. It will progress in a digital way, and I suppose it's being able, through the use of information technology, to be able to issue deliverables digitally. There's lots of use of sort of digital document systems and file management systems that a lot of clients are using, that are ultimately a portal for issuing and release of design data. But at the same time, you've got to bear in mind that the plumber and the carpenter don't necessarily have access to that on a day-to-day basis. And the same way as we get tied in with cash flow and the sort of the dragging everybody else along with a digital sort of investment, those trades will also need to come with us, because it's inevitable where it's going to end up.
I mean, there's obviously the government has famously sort of mandated sort of use of BIM level 2 on centrally procured projects, and that has impacted unquestionably certainly on the bigger projects at the bigger end of the supply chain. But for yourselves, who I guess don't perhaps work so frequently but on those sort of projects, but much smaller ones. I mean, it's and after all, that is where a lot of the work gets done still. So I mean, where do you see that? I mean, what's the sort of balance of kind of delivery model, I suppose? I mean, how much are you being asked to deliver stuff digitally now, and how much of it is still, as you say, it's a print out of an A4 CAD drawing?
I mean, certainly over the 4 to 5 years that we've been going and trading. The request for more digital-only deliverables has increased.
It has increased.
I wouldn't say it's sort of the adoption of BIM in its 100% entirety. It's partial release. So regularly we will get BIM models of a particular developer's house, working drawing house type that's been created in software like Revit, for instance, but straight away you see a two-dimensional dumb version of that same document issued for the countless trades that require it. So I don't think it's an industry that's kicking and screaming. It's certainly led by the larger companies, the more multinational companies, which Graham and I have been party of in the past. But again, it's certainly on the increase in terms of the sort of passage of that digital information.
Okay. And Graham, would you echo that? I mean, I'm particularly thinking when it comes to you sending off your outputs to the water companies. I mean, surely they're all digital, aren't they?
No, sadly not. I only wish there was. I'd say about 80-90% of our workload is digital only. The BIM, I completely echo what you've just said there. It's not a full-blown BIM model yet. Some of our clients are going that route. We've got one particular client which has virtually gone completely towards BIM, but the engineering packages just aren't quite there yet. But this is probably the closest that I've come across that does integrate, and we have already integrated into BIM models where we've got it back and we've been sent fly-throughs in 3D across the whole site, so we're sat there in the offices with the VR on and having to walk around somebody's front room. It's quite impressive stuff. I can certainly see in the future that will be where it will end up, where all your private drainage, your adoptable drainage of roads and everything that comes in these packages is all models in 3D, and it's all integrated fully for takeoffs immediately, so you could almost press a button and know if any sewers are clashing and things like that, and design out all the major problems. And I can see that's definitely where the future of the whole system will be. And in an ideal world, from a consultant side as well, I'd like to be there, because it gives me that level of comfort rather than relying on a 2D plan all the time. And having worked for developers as well, I've seen the problems on the ground, so I know that would certainly assist as well. But I'd say definitely there's an 80-90% worth of digital only at the moment.
So that's quite a chunk. That's, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be that high. I mean, what do you think, Hannah? I mean,
I mean, it's good. I mean, I guess there's also this inherent risk as well, having it in two systems, isn't there? In terms of your deliverables, your changes. So. Again, I think there's probably something for all of us to think about in terms of making the case to speed up the acceleration of adoption of digital by the clients, because if you get to that stage and it's all, that's just how it's done actually, and it's consistent as well. I think that's a challenge that we quite often see with the clients, is that they are needing to be consistent with what they're specifying, what they're asking of the consultants, and then you'll get so much more out of us, because if we're all working in that way, you become so much more proficient at it. It gives a bigger market for the software suppliers to actually help us really, perfect what we can do with it. So I think there's certainly that's what I'm going to be taking away, is how do we get the clients to be consistent and go at a consistent pace, so you're not having to do lots of work.
I suppose then, just to follow on from that point, then I mean, when you talk about how you sort of people are moving towards using virtual reality headsets and all that sort of stuff to sort of to visualise and improve your designs. I mean, that sounds very exciting. Potentially, I imagine, to a small business owner, sounds quite scary. That sounds like some quite expensive hardware we're now talking about getting involved in. I mean, we get shown and see, the bigger consultants in like elaborate BIM caves and all this sort of stuff all the time now, which again is a great way of sort of using technology to improve the output. but again, I'm guessing quite a chunky outlay for anyone, let alone a small business. So yeah, I guess this comes back to that digital transformation strategy. Really, is what's the trigger point when you suddenly think, crikey, we need a BIM cave if we're going to compete in this world. I mean, I'm guessing neither of you two have got one yet, by the way. I don't know. You might do. I mean, Barry's probably got a very cheap one in the back of the van, but I don't know.
It depends what's required as well, doesn't it? You're right, Hannah. It's what are the clients asking for? Yeah. Some start talking about BIM. Yeah, but what they don't really mean BIM.
No.
What they mean is a 3D model,
Exactly.
which you can visualise, which actually isn't really BIM. BIM is when you're starting to add the information to it as well.
Yes.
So it is. You're right. It's all about consistency, and these guys are only going to be delivering ultimately what the clients are asking for. That's what they're being paid for. That's what they'll deliver.
Yeah. And it's about finding efficiencies in workflow. I suppose that's where, as I said earlier, is in terms of challenging how we used to do things, and the ability to maximise and use advances in computing and 64-bit computing and cloud processing and three-dimensional printed models. I suppose if we were having this seminar 4 or 5 years ago, when we first started, the accessibility of that sort of information technology wasn't there, and it's still emerging. As Graham was saying, we work very well with Barry and his team in terms of what do we as a consultancy require from them as a provider. We've had several workshops looking for efficiencies, clearer outputs, better outputs, more informative outputs, and it's great to see.
Great.
And I think that is key. You need to consultancies that invest in their staff as well in terms of training. You mentioned the workshops. It's fundamental, really, that the guys that have got their hands on the tools know how to use them properly, because then they can get the best out of everything.
And I suppose it's a good point. Training as a company outlay is and can be significant. It's not just necessarily the capital cost of the training course, it's the time spent not doing the actual job that they need to do the training for. And again, Causeway sort of accessibility for training schemes, whether they're bespoke in office or remote at their locations, is ideal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, quite interesting in terms of the challenges it might pose to the business model as well, actually, because if you are, if you're selling on hours and your hours are coming down because you're being so productive, but it's almost how do you get that the investment in the software to sort of factor through and feature in it. By the same token, if you're spending time training your staff, that's not then bookable to a project, but actually you're going to be that much quicker when you start to do the projects. They're going to give better outputs. I think there's that's definitely something to unpick as part of this digital transformation strategy, is actually what are the business models we should be selling on in future, which may therefore enable a much clearer line between the investment and the return on investment from actually how you charge it to a project. I don't think we've quite got that nailed yet. No. Unless you've got solutions, you're going to...
I think one of the good things about all the training, etc., was, for example, the Graham modelling and everything else that you can go on the training systems, sit through there, but it's so easily versatile to be able to come back to the office, and then somebody else who may be using Flow, for example, they may be trained on that bit and they don't have time to do both, but then they can come back to the office, talk to each other and very quickly understand it's the same sort of regimented format throughout the programme, so you can actually easily explain to somebody else, and that really helps in the office, talking to each other member of staff, and it also grows them together as a team because they're teaching each other at the same time automatically, and that really brings an ethos in the office which is second to none, really.
And that's the value for the clients, isn't it, actually, when you're able to manage those interfaces for them.
Great. Okay, another question. This one from Richard Palmer. Thank you, Richard. And he's actually living and working in France for a small specialist consultancy in France. Now he says, and I confess, I'm going to need some expert answer here. We've been using Linux and open source software since the start on our business, with no difficulties interfacing with clients. I'd be interested to know your presenters' views on this. Open source interfacing.
It's interesting, isn't it? Open source software. I'm not sure. I mean, normally that is it's a component. Generally, it's something that you need to adapt and build on, rather than just use.
Right.
So it'd be interesting to know what Richard is.
Richard, what
using.
specific software are you using? We need to know. And Richard will tell. I mean, I guess. I mean, well, yeah. That's what. Can't you don't like Google and Apple have all this kind of stuff for free now as well? Is that or does it not work properly?
What's that? Not well, I know of for this particular industry. I mean, there are open sources of software that we build in as components that are built into our software, but we use them as an engine for something, and then wrap the whole graphical interface around it and the ability to output stuff from it.
Yeah.
That's where we tend to use open source.
Yeah. Leigh, you're looking pensive.
I'm trying. I suppose I'm trying to think of what Richard is trying to get to. Perhaps, and again, look, perhaps Richard will respond. Perhaps
sure
again, it's.
I'm watching keenly. Richard, respond.
Perhaps. I mean, ultimately, there are countless drafting software providers, whether it's the normal go-to Autodesk type products, or some. Sort of open source derivatives, so perhaps he's coming from that sort of direction. But ultimately, it's all to do with the interoperability of the data that comes from one particular package being read with another. So yes, there are countless drainage design companies. There are countless drafting software, ground modelling packages, and I suppose it's down to each individual company and SME to understand how their workflow requires one or many pieces of software. One of the challenges we found was how those packages talk to each other in a digital sort of file format sense. So often companies will update just to generate the requirement for that yearly subscription or that annual file type sort of change. So I think perhaps you might be coming from that sort of direction in terms of how these software talk to each other.
I think it often is an interoperability question, isn't it? Because I guess there is little pockets. I'm sure there's free open source software out there which will do sort of elements of stuff, but how it then could integrate with the bigger picture stuff is
and again, ultimately, it's about driving efficiencies out of that outlay. I suppose you could foresee where there was an open source, it wouldn't have the same technical support, the same sort of development sort of involvement in terms of how that package proceeds and improves, because ultimately for every £1 Graham and ourselves will spend either purchasing new assets, software or training, you want to be able to maximise and streamline the use of that software.
Again, it's having a programme which is your staff are familiar with. And if you're bringing new staff in or anybody is integrated already into the business, it's having a programme that the setup they're all used to,
familiar with it,
and your end user, again, your adopting bodies, etc. That's critical.
Well, I suppose so. When you, I mean, you say both of you are rapidly, really growing quite quickly. So when you're recruiting at the moment, typically, what sort of person are you recruiting? Are you recruiting at that sort of bright sort of graduate, sort of apprentice level, who are maybe sort of coming in charged with the ability to just pick up any kind of technology and just create something from fresh, or are you looking for more experienced people who you can put straight into sort of client-facing roles? I mean, what's the sort of person you're looking for?
From my side, I've gone for all ends of the spectrum. I've brought directors in which are heavily experienced throughout the industry. They can look at all elements of every programme. They actually sat with me on a panel where we discussed all the different options of the technology, from hardware to software, how usable it was, how easily integrated we can make that into our existing processes so there's no hiccups. But also we've gone to the other end of the spectrum where we've brought trainees and juniors in, and we're bringing them up to be the new generation, but not be taught any bad habits, hopefully, and it just become the norm for them.
Yeah, very similar to ourselves. It's because again, there's until you've got some experience in a design capability, you need somebody to be able to teach the junior members of staff coming through. It's a bit of a chicken and egg. We're probably the same as Graham is. We're looking for all grades. We go for all grades because they've all got their pros and cons. You want graduates. You want that new, fresh approach. You want new ideas from alternative sort of industries in certain instances, just to drive the thought process and drive everybody forward.
Okay, right, Richard has replied.
Excellent.
So, Richard has been using LibreOffice as a Microsoft Office replacement, sounds very sensible, using Master PDF or Foxit for PDF editing creation. But then he's saying, and I suppose they developed their own specialist application software, principally using Java, and I guess plugging that in and around other stuff. So I guess then that is kicking back into that interoperability challenge, isn't it? And I think to the point of, bringing new people into this industry, they're going to just pick up Java and just play and create their own stuff, aren't they? But
I think there's
but not too much of that, Barry? Not too much.
I don't see too much of that, fortunately.
Hannah?
I guess with that, I mean, it's again, it's about understanding what when you need off the shelf and when you need bespoke.
Yeah,
and if you're going to invest that time in something which somebody has already designed something that can do that basic repeatable function, you don't reinvent the wheel. But equally, if you do need something bespoke, I think it's great that we've got people coming into the industry who are able to do that.
Yeah.
And actually, there's probably a risk angle to this as well, in that if you're designing something that's bespoke, you need to be quite robust in terms of actually, just the outputs. What comes out of it? How confident are you in that? Yeah. And actually, are you going to stake your professional indemnity insurance on it? Which, actually, if it's bespoke and you're automating something that would have been hugely complicated to do manually anyway, is probably lower risk.
Yeah.
But equally, if you could buy something that is tried and tested, that just does a simple, repeatable process, then why not use that?
Trust in
necessarily
software.
Simple.
Well, okay, sorry, but repeatable.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, I've used one of those. I think it was Foxit that you mentioned on the PDF. So we've used that. We will look at anything that's a bespoke program, etc., if it's needed. But we've always gone back to the defaults, especially what Causeway deliver. We found, again, it's the end user, it's either the client or the adopting body, and that's critical. So whilst we will look at these bespoke options throughout and tailor any job to suit a specific requirement, your standards tend to go back. So the flexibility is there if they can talk to each other, but this tends to talk to everything from a generic side.
Great, perfect. So another, where's it gone? Another question. It's disappeared. It's gone. It's knocking around here somewhere. Apologies, I've lost your question, so I can't name check you. But here it is. Merlin, thank you. Good question. How will SMEs cope with the competition big companies offer with offshore delivery from overseas with a much cheaper rate? The old offshore international design centres. How do you compete with those? I mean, what are gentlemen finding?
I tend to find that having worked for companies such as that it comes down to the lead project role. Whoever is running lead on a design job, they are key. They then control the team below them. So whether it's myself, one of the other directors, that is the critical person, and you can't have that face-to-face with your client, with the end user, if it's getting shipped off overseas. That's why they come to the likes of ourselves, because it's that personal service and knowing the job inside out. If they change a layout, for example, and they need a quick change, design changes can be easily missed. They shouldn't be with the technology the way they are now, but this happens so often, they can be easily missed. Whereas if you've got that lead person, you cannot have that if it's an overseas, and that's what the clients are paying for, to keep up with the job all the way through and deliver a value engineered product.
Very much so. It's certainly in how ALP was created and the service that we wanted to be provided. We want to be having regular cups of coffee with our clients. We want to understand what deadlines and responsibilities and sort of systems they need going forward. It's all about that face-to-face time. There's a lot to be said for relationships in this industry. As Graham alluded to earlier, and we said prior to the seminar, sometimes we're scared of marketing for fear of what it might provide. There is a sort of a distinct sort of lack of keying consultant, shall we say, in our sort of business size.
Yeah.
You either seem to be one man and his band in your garage or around your kitchen table, or you're, dare I say, too big to care. There's that optimum in the middle that companies like ourselves can adequately fill. So yeah, as a client said to me once, you haven't got 30 graduates that I can get cheaper from somewhere else. And my response to that is no, but you'll get a technical director or a seasoned engineer that's got 20-25 years worth of experience that can go into those meetings. And there's a lot to be said for experience. It's not a race to the bottom. And clients get that.
I mean, Hannah, you've got a tricky balancing act to play here because you represent large, medium, small. I'm guessing you're saying that each have their strengths and different things to offer.
I think so, and I think, I mean, yeah, and I actually think the relationships, we'll start to see the relationships change, particularly if you believe some of the rhetoric at the moment around, you know, particularly the government clients and certainly some of the big private sector clients actually not purchasing on lowest capital cost anymore. What they want is more of a focus on quality. So if we start to see that change, I think actually you might, you know, that will start to potentially undermine some of the reasoning behind, you know, putting big cheap offshore design house, which, you know, it has its purpose, but if the clients are changing their requirements, which I suspect they are, actually, you know, no wonder you don't need to do any marketing, because you know, that quality of service and that personal relationship is I think going to become increasingly important, and perhaps, dare I say, even the tier 1 contractors, if they start to get valued on quality and actually the entire project, say, you know, the contracts and the relationships that we have with those will fundamentally change, because they're not in their sort of adversarial transactional approach where they'll be arguing with their clients about lowest capital cost actually. So I think, you know, that there are some changes afoot which might adjust that. And equally, I think if you look at what that might mean in terms of what the large consultancies might buy, I will start to see them as potentially a way in and a route to market for more of the SMEs, actually. You know, if they are, if they see their role as integrating the different levels of expertise that they won't have in-house, then perhaps what we'll start to see is for them to pick up the SMEs and the growing firms and be a route to market for you with some of the really big clients. Perhaps because they want the, you know, the face-to-face interaction, the level of expertise that they're not going to get from a sort of, you know, overseas large number of people.
Yeah, and who knows, with that beefing being debated just around the corner from here, I guess there could be ever more onus on the using the British-based supply chain. Who knows? That's a different webinar. So we've got 5 minutes or so to go, and we've got some questions to get through here. Thank you for them. Rob asks, is the future a web-based user interface with the processing done on the software provider server? This would avoid the need for SMEs to invest in expensive hardware. Barry.
Good question, I think we will be heading there, actually. It's something, and I'm glad Rob has asked that question, because that is something we are investigating right now, actually. Because traditionally, you haven't been able to do that because of the processing power required for CAD-type applications and modelling applications, but that is changing. And so, yes, that is something we are looking at very much right now, because we see it really for a number of reasons, actually. In the, you know, you guys, you've got a number of licenses. You might want to start renting software for a period. You know, this software as a service online. You know, people that don't actually need to buy the software at all could access it for a period of time. They want to use it for a couple of days. Well, fine. Okay, pay a lot per day for that, but maybe that's something that appeals to people. And then you've got the whole updating of the software. We see it actually with the big clients being quite attractive because they've got the IT departments and they hate it when there's a new release coming out because they've got a whole load of work to do. You know, distributing that out, even though it's a lot easier now than it used to be, distributing it to the users. If we're delivering it through a web interface and we're hosting it, we update it. They haven't got that worry anymore.
Oh, great. So when's it coming? Come on. Come on a date. Come on.
You can't have a date.
Catches up.
We are looking at it. It's got to be functional. It's got to work efficiently. So we're at a testing stage Yeah. So we as Causeway, we've got our hosted environment that we're looking at. We're loading our software on. We're working on it. I would say, I guess, if you wanted me to guess, I would say it's probably a couple of years away.
Right.
Maybe sooner. But I think definitely it's coming.
Well, you make a point there, Leigh, broadband. I mean, I guess, you know, okay, it's easy for me to say, you know, London in an office with good broadband, but, you know, smaller companies operate all over the UK in places where maybe that ain't the case.
Yeah, and again, I suppose with our office, we're quite lucky that we've got a more than adequate fibre optic network around us in the industrial estate that we're in and the commercial areas that we're in. But that's not going to be said for all SMEs. So maybe Barry will find it's the limiting factor will be the accessibility of broadband
But I
speeds.
think that will improve as well. You know, as time goes on, we see it, don't we, now? Yeah, the speed of internet and all that is improving. So, yeah, it's not the here and now, but it's a good point because it is something that we have to look at.
Excellent, excellent. And we have a couple more questions very quickly to get in. Manoj asks, I think this is following on from a previous earlier discussion, who are these typical clients who are requesting digital-only solutions? I think we want to share some love and some praise for a client. Maybe if you want to name names, is it a particular sector? Is it a particular type of client? Who's digital-only?
From our side, it's predominantly national house builders. They are leading the way in terms.
House builders? Leading the way?
Yeah. I've been on sites where they have no drawings on site. It's all computer based. Every developer is different. We've got some clients which you will walk in, they've got huge touchscreen 85-inch screens that you can draw on and email off from, and you're literally making the changes live in the meeting. Whereas some developers, either the slightly smaller developers or they're pretty much regimented in the ways, because if it's not broke, don't fix it. They rather use a slightly more old school sort of style. So we have to be adaptable, and the programs we use and the software we use has to be adaptable to all those factors. But the national builders, they are always trying to break new ground and always not trying to one-up each other, but they're certainly following a very similar trend. And they are looking at as much digital as possible, even down to iPads to site managers and things where they can open the drawer in, zoom into an area.
Leigh, you're nodding along. So
no, exactly.
Crikey.
Yeah,
I'm genuinely surprised, but don't know why I'm surprised, but I am surprised. Excellent. Well, look, we're out of time. Thank you all for your questions. Apologies if we didn't get to have your particular question answered. Thanks to my panellists for joining us here this afternoon for what's been because it is now afternoon, for what has been a tremendously interesting and informative discussion, I think. This webinar has been recorded, and it will be available to watch again for any of your colleagues or peers who you may think should watch what we have discussed today. So that will be made available it'll be on our website, and it'll be on where you are now. Probably in about a day or two's time, by the time we've edited it and made it nice and tidy for you. But that, for now, is it. As I say, this is the first in what we hope to be a series of webinars focusing on SMEs. So next one to come early in the new year. So watch this space. But until then, thanks to my panellists. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching. Good afternoon.